Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. More on this upcoming weekend's mega rematch, I should say, as Amendia Serrano asked for 3-minute rounds and claims Katie Taylor didn't want it.
We know that Sky Nicholson brought that up, that neither Amanda's last fight or her next fight were going to beat for 12 threes. An explanation:
other than her career high purse, she said exceeding $6 million, Amendia Serrano had other numbers in mind for Friday. If she had it her way, the 7-division champions rematch with Katie Taylor would be contested at a limit lower than their contracted catch weight of 138. Serrano would also prefer to fight 4 3-minute rounds rather than the standard 2-minute rounds for women's bouts. Serrano suggested 3-minute rounds both before their first fight and their rematch, the co-feature on the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson undercard at the AT&T Stadium in nearby Arlington. Taylor never seemed interested, according to what Serrano stated during their press conference Wednesday night, in extending rounds for either fight. Listen. If she really wanted the 3 minutes, Serrano said, I think she would have suggested it herself. Knowing that I asked the first time, she probably would have been like, hey, she does it and she's not interested in doing the 12 threes this time. But listen, it is what it is. I'm going out there fighting 10 twos. That's what we're going to do. We have less time to go out there and throw a lot of punches.
The hierarchy of thought is, if there's more time in the round and there's more time in the fight, more of the women's fights will end by way of knockout. The irony
is Amanda's fight with Danila Ramos for 12 threes, that went to a decision, whereas her fight with Stevie Morgan, scheduled for 10 twos, that's the one that ended by way of knockout.
The one scheduled for 10 twos.
4 of Serrano's 5 fights, including her victory over Danila Ramos, have been contested at the featherweight limit of 126 pounds. Since she lost a 10-round split decision to Taylor 2.5 years ago at the sold-out MSG in New York. The powerful Puerto Rican fighter has boxed at the super lightweight maximum of 140 pounds, but she didn't want to grant Taylor more of an advantage by agreeing to a 140-pound limit for their rematch. Taylor, 38, beat Serrano, 36, in a lightweight title fight in April of 2022. The 2012 Olympic gold medalist moved up to super lightweight 2 fights later, fought Chantel Cameron, lost the first one, but won the rematch. Now, she's undisputed. More reason for this fight to be fought for 10 twos instead of 12 threes. If they fought at 12 threes, it wouldn't be for undisputed. The WBC title would not have been on the line.
Remember that Mauricio Suleiman is not going for it. That's why Amanda ended up vacating the title at 126, because he won't budge.
Seemingly a compromise, Amanda agreed to fight Katie Taylor for 10 twos even though she wanted 12 threes, but in exchange for that, they're fighting at a 138-pound catch weight, not a 140-pound limit.
A compromise.
Amanda hasn't competed at super lightweight since 2018 when she took on Argentina's Yamila Reynoso for the vacant WBO title at the Bakole Center in Brooklyn. After that, she dropped all the way down to super flyweight, that's 115 pounds. A first-round knockout of Austria's Eva Voraberger in January of 2019 at the Hulu Theater.
I remember that fight. That was on DAZN.
That's the lowest that Amanda has ever fought. 115 and 140 is the highest. Overall, Serrano has held titles at 115, 118, 122, 126, 130, 135, and 140. A lot of people don't acknowledge I am going up 3 divisions for the Taylor rematch. being the unified featherweight champion, Amanda said, but it's always hard for me and uncomfortable when I have to leave my own weight class where I feel comfortable at. So just to have to eat a lot more protein, a lot more carbs, just to make sure that I feel good at the weight, I'm hoping that I can make at least the 138 pounds on Thursday. But it is what it is, you know? I'm chasing greatness, and that's going up 3 divisions to face Katie Taylor once again, and I will be victorious. Most sports books have installed Taylor as the slightest of favorites over Serrano. Netflix will start streaming the final 4 fights of the 7-bout card at 1 a.m. GMT in the UK.
8 p.m. Eastern in the US.
Yeah, Amanda's not a big woman. She doesn't have a big frame. So getting up to super lightweight, it's actually hard for her, but for what it's worth, the added weight looks good on her. Her power carried. We know her power carries because she just knocked out Stevie Morgan at 140. The power is still there.
The pace and the pressure.
So even with Katie's victory over Amanda 2 years ago, the bookies only have her a slight favorite.
That's telling.
It's because of what I said in my previous video. Amanda Serrano is the fighter that came the closest to stopping Katie Taylor, to knocking her out. And the feeling is still there that she might do it this weekend.
We'll just have to tune in and watch to see how this shakes out.
In men's heavyweight news, you may have heard that Agit Kabayel has pulled out of the purse bid for an IBF final eliminator against Martin Bakole. In a 12-month period, dominated by Riyadh season, few fighters have been as successful under the bright lights of Saudi as Germany's Agit Kabayel. Yet, despite being on the verge of a world title shot, the undefeated heavyweight is now pulled out of purse bids for his IBF final eliminator against Martin Bakole. Agit Kabayel has been ever present in the heavyweight division for the last decade, claiming a decision win against Derek Chisora back in 2017, and remaining undefeated since, but at no point threatening to succeed beyond the European level until the intervention of Al Sheikh. On the famous Day of Reckoning card back in December, Kabayel was presented with the opportunity to fight Russian knockout merchant Arslanbek Makhmudov, and to the amazement of viewers around the globe, Kabayel was able to halt Makhmudov in just 4 rounds, with a concentrated body attack that caused Arslanbek to unravel rather quickly. After that upset win left the jaws of boxing fans agape, Kabayel was once again invited to fight on a Riyadh season bill and took on another undefeated bogeyman in Cuba's Frankie Sanchez, with many believing that his win over Makhmudov would be exposed as a fluke. That was not the case. He bullied him too.
Stopped him too.
It was Kabayel who once again sprung the upset and stopped Sanchez in round 7 to announce himself as a serious threat to the heavyweight throne and put himself in a strong position to mount a world title shot in the coming year. It was then confirmed that Kabayel would be tasked with the Congo's own Martin Bakole in an IBF final eliminator to determine who will become the mandatory challenger for Daniel Dubois' heavyweight title. However, it has now been announced that Kabayel and his team have made the decision to avoid the showdown and have pulled out of the purse bids, as Bakole's trainer Billy Nelson took to social media to share his frustration.
We were talking about this fight just the other day.
On one of the live streams, Agit Kabayel has run a proverbial gauntlet, but he's decided to draw the line at Martin. That's quite enough, and he's getting off of this ride. On the heels of this news, I saw some speculating that none of us should rush to judgment, because Daniel Dubois' next fight has not been announced, and we don't yet know who he's fighting. Perhaps it will be Agit Kabayel he's fighting. Why fight in a final eliminator when you can challenge for the title straight away as a voluntary?
Makes sense.
And you could hardly judge Agit Kabayel harshly in that situation, skipping out on Martin to fight the champion.
But there is also Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker, a little over a week ago, emerged as one of the other guys in the running for a Daniel Dubois fight. So there is also him to consider.
Billy Nelson of Team Bakole took to his social media and stated, "Unfortunately, I'm hearing Agit Kabayel will be joining the long line of top fighters who don't want to fight Martin. Real shame, as it would have been a good fight." What's interesting is, they never actually reached a deal, and that's why it was going to a purse bid. Did they not reach a deal because Turkey wasn't going to pay for it? That's the best money in boxing right now, and you figure that if Turkey were putting the money up would that not have got the deal done?
Maybe. Or maybe Agit Kabayel decided Martin is just too dangerous. More dangerous than Arslanbek Makhmudov, more dangerous than Frankie Sanchez.
As a result, it is now expected that Zhilei Zhang will assume Kabayel's position in the final eliminator and edge one step closer to a maiden world title shot, with Bakole the only man standing in between the 40-year-old Chinese veteran and a challenge for Dubois' IBF crown. It's important to note that Martin already accused Zhang of ducking, not but a few weeks ago. Martin said Zhang swerved him. So is he now going to stand in Kabayel's place?
And didn't Zhang say that he had some fight news pending?
He did, but that was weeks ago. If it was of any substance, wouldn't we have heard about it by now? Bakole versus Zhang is expected to take place in spring of next year, but is not expected to take place on Dubois' undercard February 22nd.
You would have thought.
Bear in mind that Martin Bakole was already beaten by America's own Michael Hunter, who has since fallen from grace. His victory over Martin was several years ago, and several fights. A lot has happened since then, and Martin Bakole has really come into his own and hit his stride, emerged as this division's true bogeyman.
I don't know for sure that Zhang is going to take this fight.
Zhang rose to popularity. Zhang entered the public eye by taking on tough fights, perceived tough challenges like Philippe Hergovic.
Joe Joyce.
He annihilated Joe Joyce. He stopped that hype train.
They were heralding Joe Joyce as the second coming of George Foreman for beating Joseph Parker, who then beat Zhilei Zhang.
After Zhang beat Joe Joyce.
Another rousing round of musical chairs in the heavyweight division with the non-champions, because that's what these guys are.
Turn over to the IBF's current rank standings. And in a situation where Agit Kabayel has pulled out and Zhilei Zhang could potentially, the next man in line is Frankie Sanchez.
Ugh.
I don't even think he's fought since being stopped by Agit Kabayel, but he's there. Ranked right behind him is Nigeria's own F.A. Ajagba. He suffered his first professional loss to Frankie Sanchez. What was it, 2 or 3 years ago? I think he's coming off a dubious win over Guido Vianella.
Yeah, I saw that fight. I felt that Guido won the fight.
F.A. is a guy who I feel like it's time to shit or get off the pot. Are you going to do something in this division or not? That if the opportunity presents itself for him to fight Martin Bakole in this IBF final eliminator, is he going to do it?
Somebody needs to.
Though no one seems to be in a rush, not after Martin did what he did to America's own Jared Anderson. He's the hottest potato of the hot potatoes. The bogeyman of the bogeymen. Seems like the IBF is going to have to twist somebody's arm to get in the ring with Martin Bakole. All of this comes to us on the heels of news Frank Warren saying that Anthony Joshua is officially out of the picture for a Daniel Dubois rematch at any point next year because Dubois' next fight is on February 22nd
against an opponent that is yet to be announced.
And then the fight after that will be against his IBF mandatory challenger, whoever it's going to be. Initially, it was thought it would be the winner of Bakole versus Kabayel, but we saw what happened.
And so we've known for some time now that Anthony was not going to go in this direction, that the rematch would not happen. We've known for weeks.
The story is that Anthony Joshua wanted that rematch but was overruled, presumably by his team, by his promoter, Eddie Hearn, by his management, the people in his corner. Anthony Joshua wanted nothing more than to face Daniel Dubois on February 22nd. The two-time heavyweight champion was heavily beaten by Dubois at Wembley in September and called for a rematch. Joshua was favored to beat the 27-year-old going in and win the IBF title, but found himself outgunned and knocked out in the 5th round.
Yet another testament to how much more spontaneous the heavyweight division is than some other divisions, some other weight classes, because you're always one punch away from being knocked out. Anything can happen.
The biggest upsets in the sport of boxing: Mike Tyson's shock upset loss to Buster Douglas, Anthony Joshua's shock upset loss to Andy Ruiz, subsequently Daniel Dubois.
In the heavyweight division, anything can happen.
Discussions with Joshua and his medical team, promoter Eddie Hearn, his management team, and trainer Ben Davison reached the conclusion that AJ didn't want to hear. We had a very awkward call, Hearn told Boxing News. He wanted to fight on February 22nd and basically was told there's no way you can start camp and be 100% for February 22nd physically. There's nothing major, he added. There's 2 or 3 issues that he had a little bit in camp, but also after the fight as well. And they said you need to come back in May or June, and he didn't want to do it. He wanted to fight in February, but unfortunately we kind of had to overrule him on this and say no, because we can't afford to not get this right.
He says there's no major issues, but it's gotta be something significant if he can't come back until spring, really. Early summer.
It's not just one issue. According to Eddie, it's 2 or 3. What could it be? Hand issues?
Beats me.
If you get beaten again by Daniel Dubois, you have to seriously consider your future. We got one last chapter in his career that we need to make sure we get 100% spot on. So when he comes back in May or June or whenever that's gonna be, you've got to be physically, mentally 100% ready. He wants to rematch Daniel so bad.
He ain't gonna get the chance now, at least not next year.
Joshua and his team will now watch the Alexander Usyk versus Tyson Fury rematch on December 21st, and whoever Dubois faces in Riyadh in February, the outcomes will play a major part in what Joshua does next. As much as it burns people, AJ's a pretty big name, Hearn said. He can walk into any fight he wants, but we've got to get it right. We can't afford to lose again. I think every fighter would want to avenge a defeat. At the same time, the Fury fight is the biggest fight in the sport, but let's see how it goes December 21st.
I remember when Eddie was talking about the Daniel Dubois rematch before we got here, he was prioritizing a Fury showdown first. He views it as a bigger fight. Probably is.
That is his preference, for Anthony Joshua to face Tyson Fury before he faces Daniel Dubois again. Though when you look at it through that scope, it's almost like you're cashing him out.
May as well be.
To give him the best chance at victory, he's got to settle his soul. You would think he has to settle affairs with Daniel first to prove that he's ready to fight Tyson Fury. And what about Tyson Fury? He might lose again in December.
Well, if he does, that evens things up a bit.
That Anthony is coming off a loss, and in this scenario, Fury would be as well, so making a fight between them, they'd be on even terrain. They would both be on the bounce. Is that what Eddie Hearn is banking on?
Fury losing?
Now, Fury winning leaves the door open for a Tyson Fury versus Daniel Dubois showdown. Tyson Fury versus Daniel Dubois for all the marbles, all the belts.
Fury losing? Well, then maybe he can fight AJ.
So many dub Anthony's decision to forego the rematch as being uncharacteristic, but if the nature of that was indeed medical, then it's not like he had a choice. Though at the same time, that could just be Eddie Hearn putting a spin on it, allowing Anthony to prioritize a fight with Tyson Fury and simultaneously saving face.
He couldn't fight him in February. The doctor said.
Neither would surprise me because Eddie Hearn already expressed his preference before we got here, and he would prefer for Anthony to target Tyson Fury.
That's what he said.
I think Anthony is facing the end of the road. He is one loss away, I think, from the end of his career. So they're just trying to get the most out of what remains. And that's not a shot at him. That's not a slight at Anthony. I think Anthony has been a very good fighter, very good champion, a great ambassador for the sport.
But another loss, and you're done at the upper echelon of this division. You're done at the forefront of heavyweight boxing. Some people are convinced.
It's not going to take another loss for him to be done. He's done already. The way he was beaten by Daniel Dubois, he was never really in that fight. That most of it, he was getting brutalized.
And that was a fight that he was heavily favored to win, so that when he loses, what does that do to his confidence?
He might be done.